Hi, welcome to Mind Matters, the podcast where we talk about mental health in our community, current trends, and what's going on in the world of mental health and substance use disorder care. My name is Wendy McCarty Van Bemmel. I'm so excited to be here today with you all and be your host. I'd like to introduce the rest of my co-hosts today, where we're going to be talking about fire and rescue with mental health. Gabe, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Gabe Fernandez. I'm a community liaison for Central Florida Behavioral Hospital, but also specifically I work with first responders, and I'm just happy to be here today with this panel.
Awesome. It's good to have you.
Thank you.
And I'm Claudia Fernandez, no relation to Gabe. Orange County Fire Rescue, I'm a lieutenant paramedic, and I'm also the behavioral health coordinator for our program.
Awesome. And who do you have here with you?
This handsome fellow is Jake, and he is part of our therapy dog program that is under the behavioral health program for Orange County Fire Rescue.
Well, I have to say this is a first and probably a very popular co-host today.
He is. He's a great guy to be around. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. And thanks for being here, Jake.
My name is Richard Gallegos. I am the community liaison for Palm Point Behavioral. I am a former paramedic, which I worked in the field for about 10 years and know what it's like firsthand to struggle with mental health issues. So very excited for the topic.
Oh, we're so excited to have you all today. And we're just going to jump right in and talk a little bit about what your day looks like. And, you know, I'm sure you run into situations probably every day where you're working with people's mental health and assessing. Like, what is that like for you?
It's definitely been a transition. Obviously, as firefighters and as paramedics, we're out in the field and we're, helping people on their worst day, whether it's a fire, a car accident, whatever it is. But then we obviously get a lot of patients that, are suffering with some kind of mental health issue. And so we also, have to be prepared for that as well. But then also that takes a toll on us, which is really my focus now. Is now all of a sudden my main concern is no longer the community now. It's our department and the people that are running on the community. So we take care of our own people so they can take care of the community.
Oh, yeah. I want to get into that side of it too. Absolutely. That's such a big part of it. So I just read this statistic that 60,000 calls come in for behavioral health. I think it was in California. Mm-hmm. And I was amazed by just the sheer volume of behavioral health calls mm-hmm. that you all get when you're going out into the community. What are some of the experiences like on a daily basis that you guys work with?
I mean, obviously, a lot of the medical issues could be masked, and it could end up being a mental health issue. And so that's when we figure out, when we're actually assessing the patient and figuring out, okay, maybe this isn't a physical issue, this is more of a mental health issue. So figuring that out, and then also figuring, what do we do about this? Is it just a transport and that's it and we're done? Or are we, providing those resources, that are out there? And again, resources for the community and resources also for us. Because again, our exposure to what we see every day, can accumulate and will accumulate over the years. And so that's one of the things that we're focusing on. It's a kind of two. It's the community and also our own people.
Sure.
Now, when we first connected, it was probably about 4 years ago, and that's because your role is a brand new role to the department. So can you tell us a little bit about why that started and what the progress you've had?
Sure. So we did have a behavioral health program. In a way, it was separate. We had a peer support team. We had a critical incident stress team, and it was, I think, more reactive, right, as we are, but we did have, and it started about 20 years ago, which I would say was, very futuristic considering, mental health in the fire department. But then, 4 years ago, we did, struggle in our department, and we did have suicides. And then we took a look at what was going on in our department, and not just our department, honestly, first responders as a whole, just the whole world. And so we ended up focusing on what we can do and to change it instead of, reactive proactively. And from then on, that position was created and I was placed in that position. And I'm very honored. It's huge responsibility, but we have been able to do so much in the last few years. And like I said, focus on our people and, how we're helping our people. Again, it does bring back to the community because, if you take care of the employee, they will take care of the community. But at the end of the day, these are, we're the ones that are out there and, in the community fighting fire and seeing all the trauma. I mean, they say that I believe it's like 188 traumatic events is what a regular first responder will experience in about a 25-year span versus a regular person will experience 4.
Yeah, that's
so
a big difference.
That's a lot of exposure, and it could happen at any time. It could be a normal day. And again, I mean, that's one of the things that we love about our job, right? We never know. No day is ever going to be the same, and that's great. But then there's also that other side of it where you never know what you're going to see, and you never know what's going to stick with you for years to come.
Richard, you've worked in the field before you came over to Palm Point. Tell me or walk me through what that's like when you're walking up to a scene and you're not sure and you're thinking, okay, I don't know if there's a mental health situation going on. What's that like for you as a professional?
So I would say in my experience, almost every scene is a mental health scene.
Really?
Because no matter what they're calling for, if they're calling 911, most of the time they're in a very amped up, adrenaline-induced state. And that's going to induce anxiety. That's going to induce
trauma,
anger, all these different things. And we have to be the ones to be able to filter through that, help bring them down, get them to mirror our demeanor while we're absorbing what they're putting off.
Right.
So a lot of times, even if it's not 100% specific to behavioral health, you still have a lot of those aspects on every single call.
Wow.
So, for example, if a wife is calling for her husband who, just passed out, she's in a very heightened state. That's all anxiety. That's all adrenaline talking to you.
Yeah.
So trying to bring her down to get the pertinent information while you're still trying to show compassion without mirroring her level of anxiety, it takes a lot.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us will develop almost this character-like demeanor to where we almost have to disassociate or disconnect with what we're dealing with and allow our training and our knowledge to run the call, just so we tend to not absorb as much of what they're putting off. And what happens is we get so good at doing that, I think a lot of it almost translates into our own personal lives, to where we start to feel very disconnected. We start to feel, borderline numb. And, we wake up one day and we realize, man, I haven't felt happiness in a very long time. And, it's frustrating because you can't put your finger on exactly where everything went wrong. You just know that you're not the person you were 5 or 6 years ago, 10 years ago. And, everybody around you has noticed it for a long time. It's almost like you're the last one to realize because you've been in that character for so long. And it's just a defense.
Yeah. It's a body, your body's probably natural defense too, to compartmentalize, just to be able to handle that amount of trauma, because that's really what it is. You're seeing traumatic events over and over and over again. So what are some of the resources for our EMTs, for our fire and rescue professionals?
Well, I think nowadays there's so many more than there were before, right? And I think for first responders and for anybody, I think everyone wants it to be specific to them, right?
Okay.
It's very important that, if someone is selling me something, I want it to be specific to me and to what I do.
Sure.
And firefighters and, first responders, dispatchers, cops, we're all very different in what we do, compared to everyone else, right? All the exposures and everything. So when we do see a resource that is specific to us, it's, it's more inviting to us, right? At the end of the day, we should be getting the help, and if it is, geared towards us, it's even better because there is that understanding, know. But there's so many different resources, and kind of figuring out what the resources are is so important for us, especially, in my position as the coordinator, figuring out when we have a situation, what are the resources we're going to use, because it's not the time to figure out like, okay, what's the number again?
Sure.
So figuring out, what are the crisis centers, what are the long-term, what are the outpatients, and just kind of learning that before you actually need it. So that way you are a liaison. At the end of the day, we're not clinicians. We're not pretending to be, but we know some really good ones. And so that's really the trick, is just figuring out when we have a situation, who is it that we're going to send them to, provide them, access to it, which is one of the most important things, because people may not want to reach out, especially at work, even though issues may or may not be related to work. You still may not want everyone in your business at work.
Yeah, I think that's normal.
Right? We live with each other, so there's a lot more that goes on. We get to know each other. But at the end of the day, you may not want, anybody to know. So giving making, those resources, making those resources available, to the department without having to go through anyone. So, we have QR codes, even on my shirt. It's a mental health.
I love
It's a mental health shirt for the month of May, which is why I'm wearing this. But one of the things is we have our, a website, firestrong.org, and that's where we have all of our resources up to date. So once we go and we vet the resources, we have them on this website. So that way someone can just access it. Their family members can access it. There's also, a 24/7 clinician that's available to them through the Firestrong website. So again, it's just being able to provide the resources. And again, if nobody wants to call us or involve us, that's okay, but they have access to them.
I know there are certain clinicians that can go through a special training. Can you talk to us about that?
Right. So that's, they're calling it to become culturally competent, right? And so there's certain clinicians that can go through a program, which is through UCF Restores, and they put them through a 2-day program. And they're able to, the first day is more clinical, and it is, provided by UCF Restores. And then the second day is more hands-on. So they get to go to the fire grounds, they get to wear our gear all day, they get to, pull a dummy out of a fire, and they get to, be in a smoky room and in a maze, cut up cars, pull hose, whatever it is that, we do. And then just as we're there, as well as the firefighters, explaining to them, this is kind of what it feels like. This is what it looks like. This is what it feels like to even have your gear on all day. 24 hours of doing this. And granted, not every 24 hours is a Chicago fire, episode, like a lot of people think. But then there's the reality of, you will literally, deliver a baby, and then 30 minutes later, you're working a code on someone.
Wow.
So you literally, and I have seen that a couple of times in my 24 years, where, in one shift, you will see death and you will see life all in one, which is quite interesting. But going back to that, that program is incredible that is offered, because then the clinician becomes culturally competent. So that way, when we go and we sit with them and talk to them, we're not spending the first few sessions explaining what we do and what are the difficulties of our job. We can get right into whatever the issue is specific to that person.
Yeah.
So it makes the firefighter a little bit more comfortable with going to someone that understands us a little bit.
For sure.
Yeah, and having programs like that and having positions like yourself is so incredibly impactful. I know for me, when I finally had to ask for help, I was at my lowest point in my life, hands down. I was terrified, I was scared, I was angry at myself. I had no idea where to go for resources.
Yeah.
A lot of us don't ask for help because, the resources that were available to us back then are the same ones that we would take patients to.
That makes sense.
And a lot of times, we're here to protect the community, right? Serve and protect. And, just like law enforcement, we feel like we have this debt to society, and we're there to protect them and help them.
You have to be the strong one at all times.
Yeah, we don't, we're the people that people call for help.
Right.
Right. So with that, sitting in groups and talking to people that, you might be sitting across from somebody that you've transported.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not that you feel that you're, different or, better or anything like that.
No.
But a lot of times we don't want to tarnish how people see the first responders.
How did it feel that first time to be vulnerable?
Oh, it was, my hairs are standing up right now because it really is. It's liberating, but terrifying at the same time.
Yeah.
It really is. And, back then I didn't have resources like this. And having that cultural competency, how do you explain to somebody what it's like to run 10 calls in a row to where it's almost abuse of the 911 system? They don't need, fire EMS. They don't, most of them, it's a lot of them, I dare to say, may not even need a doctor.
Okay.
But, they're so ingrained in calling 911, and you're showing as much compassion as you can. But then that 11th call, it may be a pediatric drowning. It may be a gunshot wound to the chest. And now you've had, these calls that have desensitized you, but now you have to be game on. Having those ups and downs of your emotions, it's hard to explain that to people who don't understand what that's like.
Yeah.
Or what it's like working that pediatric drowning. And now the next call, you're running on a stroke alert and the person can't even formulate words. And you can see the terror in their eyes. And now you're absorbing that. So having the cultural competencies, having, programs and resources that understand, You know, those barriers that we have is key.
Can you walk us through what a typical day was like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the most frustrating parts were not knowing what your day was going to hold, right? So having 10 calls in a row with, you know, somebody who may not even need a doctor, you know, borderline 911 abuse, which is extremely, extremely common. You know, trying to show the compassion that, you know, you have to and that they deserve. But then on that 11th call, you're going to a pediatric drowning. And then you're trying to switch from this disassociated, this, you know, okay, going through the motions, you know, provider to it's game on. And, you know, then trying to come back because that 12th call may be another 911 abuse, right? Or it may be, you know, somebody who has a stroke alert and the wife is screaming and you're looking at him and you can see that he's trying to talk, but he can't get words out. And you can see the fear in his eyes, and being able to just go back and forth between those emotions without having it affect you is unreasonable. You know, I think.
Do you talk together about it? I'm curious.
So when I was in the field, we felt that collectively you're doing okay if you can joke about something.
Yeah.
If you can find that dark humor, if you can laugh it off, or if you can, you know, and you're not laughing at the patient.
Of course not.
You're finding something to help deflect from the heavy that you just dealt with. So you always felt like if you could laugh about it or find something entertaining in it, then you're doing okay. When in reality, that's the exact opposite.
Yeah.
I always look at those laughs as almost like a plunger, just plunging everything in and packing it tight. And it gives you this false sense of security that, okay, well, I'm doing fine mentally. This isn't affecting me. But yet you get off work and, you know, you don't know how to connect with your family again, right? All you know is sarcasm and cynicism because, again, it's the mask you're wearing. And a lot of people think that we have one of the best schedules in the world. You work 24 hours, you're off 48. You know, every day is a Friday or Monday, you know, however you want to look at it. But people don't realize that you need 24 hours to decompress. And then that next 24 hours, all you can think about is a shift coming up. And, you know, you almost live in this constant state of decompression to anxiety, decompression to anxiety. And then they just blur so much together that it's constant anxiety. But again, you can laugh at it, so you're doing fine.
When really you're just tore up inside.
You don't know which way's up.
Those are some of the more, I guess, challenging events and I guess issues and traumas that come with it. Are there any what makes your job rewarding? Is there anything that makes you, you know, proud and when you get dressed and you suit up?
There's a lot of those days, honestly. I mean, whether in the field, I mean, obviously helping our community in whichever way. Of course, when you get the saves, or even if it's not the save, even if you just change that person, you made their day better by showing up and helping them do whatever. That's enough. You know, they fell out of the bed. It's nothing life threatening, but yet you changed their whole day just by, you know, being kind and helping them and, you know, and all that. But then also, you know, in this position, for me, it is very rewarding because at the end of the day, it was a shift. You know, now my priority is the, you know, is the people that we work with, right? That I've worked alongside for all these years.
Can you explain that role a little bit for us? What do you exactly do in the role? What is the role called?
Sure. So it's the behavioral health coordinator.
Okay.
And basically, you know, my job is to figure out, you know, the resources, and when people do reach out, have a way that they can reach out. So we do have a 24/7 hotline for our firefighters, for their families to call. And it's just one person. You know, we do rotate. We do have a rotation so that way none of us get burnt out as well. And you're able to call that number, and whether it's, hey, I don't know how to log into our insurance, I don't know how to get a clinician, I just want to talk to someone, just anything, it's just one number where they can reach out to.
And is that for all fire and rescue or Orange County?
That's
or?
for all of our fire departments.
Fire
so
departments.
we've opened it up to everybody: support
Okay.
staff, mechanics, dispatchers.
That's
firefighters,
amazing.
Everybody. We're all part of this
And what's the
family.
phone number?
Well, that's our no.
Oh,
That
okay.
number is for our department.
I gotcha.
Because it's specific
Okay.
to our to our resources and to our personnel. But then once they're able to call, it's just one place that they are able to. We can at least divert them to where they need to go. So again, that's where we would it gives us the opportunity to let them know, okay, you're in a crisis. This is where we need to go.
Sure.
Or you probably need outpatient. Let's go ahead and get you an assessment done here, and they can provide that. So it's also then on the other end is figuring out what those resources are. So that's another part of my job is where I met Gabe as well, is figuring out the different resources out there, what they provide, and how they can help us. And so just kind of putting all of that together, and then in the middle is changing that culture. I think that's the hardest part, and especially, like I said, I've been on for 24 years, and I've seen a difference where, when I first started, it was suck it up, buttercup. That was basically it. And if you couldn't handle it, then go find a job somewhere else. And I think that has changed a lot, and it definitely has changed in the last few years where we're talking about it now. Like, we're actually talking about it where before we weren't. I mean, we're wearing T-shirts, for the whole month of May. We've been able to do a training. So we do a training every year now. We're going into our third year now, where we take the units out of service for 4-hour blocks, and we're able to basically just talk about mental health. And of course you think, oh, no one's going to want this. We're going to get stuff thrown at us at the class. But to be honest with you, the first time we did it, people were so thankful. Like our crews, our personnel were like, thank you for doing this. We've needed this for so long, but no one was talking about it. And I think that's honestly the hardest part of my job is, trying to help that or change that culture. It's almost kind of like, turning a cruise ship around. It's going to take a little bit.
It does. It takes a while.
But, we're bringing in the retirees, that have left. They've reached out to our program. They have that number, and they're able to reach out and say that program didn't look like that when they were there, but now it's something that now they're being affected. So when you're supposed to be retired and just relaxing, enjoying, that retirement, now they're having the nightmares. Now they're having, and they don't know where
because
to go.
we've never unpacked that trauma.
Of course. But now we have, they can come back to this.
That's fantastic that it's open to them as well.
Oh, absolutely. We've opened the training to them, the number, the resources, anything that we do, the T-shirts were sent to them. So we're trying to involve everyone. And then on the beginning, the recruits, that's just normal now. Now, as soon as you come in and we have a recruit class, it's normal. That's going to be the class that you get 6 months from now. They get checked in on, make sure, that everything, that they still know how to access, the number and all the resources.
That's
so
great.
We are trying to get the very beginning and the end and then everyone in the middle. So that's really...
Now, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Since Jake is asking for our attention here, tell us how Jake fits into the picture and what his daily duties are.
So Jake is one of the hardest working people in our
Aww.
No,
yes, he is.
Definitely one of the most handsome, but
for sure.
So Jake is part of our therapy dog program, and we've honestly had a therapy dog program for a while. It was a volunteer status with one of our retired firefighters who started it years ago before therapy dogs were cool. I don't know if they were never not cool, but she started it a long time ago. And then, it's kind of, grown into now, now the therapy dogs are part of our department, and owned by the department. So that way they are able to stay with their handler. So they are assigned, we have 2 of them. That are full-time, and the other ones are volunteers, but together they do create that therapy dog program. So the 2 that are, with the department, they do have a primary handler, and they both stay with them at the station. So on their 24-hour shift, they go to them, at the station, and it's great for, we have 45 stations, so of course there's a couple stations that are jealous that they don't have a dog, right?
Sure.
We all wish they had a dog. Dispatchers wish they had a dog on the comm floor, the mechanics wish they had one, so we're not there yet, but one of the reasons they're just available there. And so even if there is a situation where we have a critical incident and we want to do a debrief or we want to, get the crews together, one of the jobs is for us to pick up in their new dog vehicle. We pick up the dogs and we bring them to the debrief. So, just having a dog, even this, this podcast, right? Just having him here is just, it kind of brings the guard down. And we brought all of the dogs to our training so that, of course, course, nobody wants to be at training, but you have a dog, you're kind of talking, you make it a little bit fun, right? Mental health is not fun to talk about, but it's something we have to talk about. So if we make it somewhat entertaining, somewhat relevant in how we learn, then I think people are more open to it.
And there's something healing about petting a dog or just having a
Absolutely.
dog lay
I'm
his
feeling
head
it
on
right
your
now,
lap.
yeah.
That just,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, they say that I'm not going to get the number right, but I believe between 6 and 12 minutes of petting a dog, really, it lowers your heart rate, your blood pressure.
Oh,
So, I
cool.
mean, there's scientific facts, that do, back that up as far as petting. Of course, if you're terrified of a dog, that's probably not going to work for you.
Yeah.
So we do understand, therapy dogs, it's not for everybody, but we also, that's one of the things that we're trying to do is have different resources for different people. Not everyone is going to enjoy the dogs. That's okay. But then we're trying to do other things, whether it's the yoga, whether it's the classes, just having those resources available. So again, I think that as long as we have a lot of things that people can choose from,
Yes.
kind of like what you were saying before, it's important to have that. So when you are ready, then there is a place to go, or there's places to go.
Yeah, when someone is an EMT or in fire and rescue and they realize they need a higher level of care, Gabe, can you walk us through what Central Florida Behavioral is doing
Yep.
to help these individuals?
Absolutely. Actually, that's when Claudia and I first connected. And what we do is, originally we wanted to have programming for first responders, but that kind of never really happened. So now what we have is protocols to keep the first responders safe and anonymous. So what we do is we'll meet we get called, we'll meet the first responder at an employee entrance. From there, we'll bring them to a conference room away from our admissions area. That way, we minimize the chances of them running into another first responder or maybe a client or patient they've worked with. Then from there, we perform the assessment in the conference room. More than likely, at that point, they're going to be admitted because they're brought in either through a chaplain, peer support, or like some kind of supervisor. From there, they go into our program that's affective disorder. So we're kind of very selective. We want people that are motivated for treatment in that program. Our psychiatrist is really good about working with trauma, PTSD. Also, she knows what medication someone can be on or not be on to return to work. So that factors into the treatment plan. And I think one of my favorite things is that our CEO wanted to give back to the community, so she waives the copay for all first responders.
That's amazing.
So, but to be clear, we don't have programming for specific to first responders, but we will definitely keep them safe and get them to the appropriate next level of care.
Richard, I have a question for you. If you wanted to say something to someone that was going through some of the same feelings or is going through those feelings, how would you instill hope, or what would you advise them to do?
It's take the first step. No one expects themselves to be able to run a full scene by themselves. We all have support. Behind every good medic, there's a great EMT. So we all have the need that we know camaraderie. Mm-hmm. If there's nothing else we know camaraderie. And that doesn't just translate to certain aspects. That's everywhere. I've talked to firefighters from all across the country, in the thousands. And the one thing that I share with all of them is all of our stories are the same. Mm. Your trauma looks no different than my trauma. Your experience, really no difference than my experience. We all know what it's like to carry that, that bag of rocks. And asking for help, emptying that bag, is as simple as asking for help, to hand you a supply that you need in that moment. So taking the first step, swallowing your pride, because that's what it is. It's pride. And knowing that your struggles doesn't define you as a first responder, and you're not going to tarnish how the community sees a first responder. Nobody's going to think you're weak. As a matter of fact, that's what I thought. But when I came back from my treatment and I was so open about it, all of a sudden I had people asking me in the ambulance bays at the hospitals about my experience. Or they would tell me things like, it sounds like exactly what I'm struggling with, or what I'm dealing with. And you realize you become almost a voice for those who don't know how to ask.
Becomes your superpower. Being able to talk about it and say it out loud, that's gives you power.
Yeah. And getting in front of it. You know, you touched on something very important earlier with the recruits. You know, these young men and women that are coming in that they don't know what they're getting themselves into.
Yeah, and to know that ahead of time and to have the resources right away, I mean, that's huge.
You know, a lot of people say, well, I signed up for this. Well, did you though? Because nobody prepared me for what it was like to hold a limp child, to have a screaming mother begging you for help, to walk into a room and see a mom or a son or a dad who's OD'd, and now you're looking at their kids, or child abuse. No one, they can tell you how to work those scenes and the protocols and the steps, the recipe, but nobody ever teaches you how to deal with those emotions. And that's the most important part. So getting ahead with the recruits, one of the things I always taught my students when I was a paramedic instructor was, you know, and this is, again, I'm just speaking from my own personal views, you know, we don't save lives. We prolong the inevitable. Saying that you save a life is, and again, too much responsibility for me, right? Because then what happens is you unknowingly accept all the responsibility for the ones who don't make it in front of you. So, you know, by wearing that mantle, you're accepting this one. So, you know, to get in front of these young, you know, the next generation and, you know, tell them that you're just here to do the best you can. Trust your training, trust your knowledge, trust your experience, and trust the people around you. And do the best you can. A lot of times it works. Sometimes it doesn't. But that's not a result on you.
Yes. I think that's so important. As we close here today, I'm going to ask Claudia a very similar question. What instills hope for you, or what does that look like for you?
Honestly, I think it's just seeing the people that have come back and thanked us, you know, and again, not just the community, but even our own personnel, which again, it started out where, you know, we weren't sure if this is going to work, but now we literally have had, you know, and I have had the messages of you saved my life because you called that day. And again, it wasn't anything, you know, specific as far as it was a team effort. You know, someone called to let me know that there was an issue going on, right? And again, it's having those, you know, that in place. So I think the program is working, seeing it work, you know, with families and couples. And it's not just about the work. I mean, obviously the work, you know, we all deal with issues at home, whether it's family issues, you know, health, finances, anything that's going on like anybody else does. But then we come to a job. We have chosen a career where we're exposed to trauma every single day. And so that, like what you were saying, that bag of rocks, it gets filled up a lot quicker. And then just kind of getting rid of all those rocks and making sure that you know that, you know, you can still perform your job. And then the job is great, but sometimes I think we forget that not just, you know, I am a firefighter. Okay, but there's more than just I am a firefighter. There's more than I am a mother, I'm a daughter, I'm a wife, you know, and so making sure that at the end of that 24-hour shift, when you do get home, going home and being able to do that. And sometimes that is difficult because you're carrying so much. You do become a different person. Obviously, you know, you're in this career for 25, 30 years and you obviously mature. We're different people than we were when we were, you know, a few years ago. But then you also, all the different experiences. And I try to explain to my kids why they are not allowed to go to the beach by themselves. Why am I so overprotective?
Yes.
And I have a 16-year-old, which I'm able to tell now and explain to him why. And he's like, really? And I'm like, yeah, that's why you can't. He's like, okay, I understand now. Now he doesn't like it, but he understands why. So that's one of those things that it does change you, you know, it does. And you're right. Sometimes you become that, you know, you have to become almost numb because if not, it just hurts too much, you know, and that goes for both, not just the good. I mean, the bad you don't want to feel, but then you start not feeling the good either. So it's just realizing that there is help out there, whether it's through the department, you know, through the union, through your church, through whatever support system. It's really important to find what works for you.
Yeah. And that's going to look different.
Yeah,
for
for
everyone.
everybody. It's going to absolutely look different, but knowing that there are things out there, and just, you know, trying to, you know, that olive branch is going to be extended. You just kind of like Richard had said, you have to be that, you know, that first step is the hardest. Is, you know, when we're rappelling off of a building, that first step, that first getting, okay,
it's scary.
That's the scariest. And then
just gotta get the words out.
Okay, this is pretty. This is okay, you know, and just knowing that you're not going to do it alone.
That's beautiful.
I can hear the enthusiasm in your voice when you talk about this, and I've seen all the progress you've made in a little bit of time. So in my mind, you're like the perfect person for this role. And we've talked about it before, that mental health in a lot of ways is a calling. So can you tell us what kind of made you get into this like niche field?
Well, I've always been part of the peer support team as far as I can remember, right? And it was one of those where when I first started, there was no team. And then I remember having, one of those calls that just kind of rocks your world, right? I had a vision of, it wasn't Chicago Fire, but it was very similar. And I was like, oh, this is what I'm going to do. My first entrapment, I'm going to go and I'm going to be in there with the patient and I'm going to talk to them and they're going to come and they're going to bake me a cake because I was so great, right? So, like, I had this vision of what was going to happen.
Sure.
And my very first, entrapment call, we had 2 people that were already dead before we arrived and we had to extricate one. And I was like, wait, who's going to bake me the cake? Like, hold on, this is not what I was envisioning, right? And just hearing, even, after that night, just realizing that, that kid just lost his mom 2 days before Christmas, and even years later, I remember where it was, what it smelled like, what it felt like, how cold it was that day, like all the details that, just marked that day. But then realizing, that night trying to go to sleep, when you got back to shift, that was very difficult.
I can imagine.
Hearing the screams, and it was a lot. And then not being able to tell anybody, because I had 6 months on. I wasn't going to tell anybody.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I was expecting this is why you shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, or maybe this isn't for you. But not being able to talk to anybody, that was very difficult. And so I wanted to change that. And so I became, once the team became, was created, I became part of the team. And I always felt like, I'm helping the community, but there's something about helping your own brothers and sisters.
Yes.
Like that's a
helping
great
the
feeling.
helpers.
Yes.
Helping the helpers that don't usually want help, so they're harder to provide help to.
And
But
it sounds like, what you've done and what direction we've gone has really been so great over the past few years in the direction that we're headed. If you're watching this today, know that there's help out there. If you are in this field and you're feeling some of the same things that we talked about today, make that call, take a chance, ask for help, and it's out there. Whether you get help through our facilities, that's Central Florida Behavioral, Palm Point Behavioral, University Behavioral Center, and La Amistad, we provide a full continuum of care from intensive outpatient all the way through residential treatment. We're a phone call away. Get your help through local resources. Check out Jake here. Here's his card. He's got a cool QR code on the back as well. I want to thank my guest co-host today. Thank you so much for sharing your stories, for being open and honest. And I know a lot of people are going to listen to this and be helped by it. So thank you, and thanks for joining Mind Matters today. Have a great day.